Ladies and gentlemen, that indeed was one of the cutest acts that we've seen in a long while. And it, of course, brings our attention to the very fact that there's going to be a lot of relearning and unlearning that will to follow in the years to come. We might have to adapt to new things, and at the same time, we might be required to go back to some of the basics, things that we've discarded thinking that they no longer apply. But in the years to come, who knows, they might make a comeback. Our next speaker, in fact, our keynote speaker, is someone who's, of course, put the internet on fire. Some of her talks are immensely popular, not just in Pakistan, but around the world. She questions things that perhaps allows us to go into this reimagining bit, a place, a space where you can sort of go back and relax, and at the same time be a little restless and edgy. She's an author whose work focuses on a vast and volatile arena in which politics and religion intersect. She describes herself as a Jew who once seriously considered becoming a rabbi, a former convent schoolgirl who daydreamed about becoming a nun, and an agnostic with a deep sense of religious mystery, though no affinity for organized religion. And most importantly, if you look at all her work, her writings, her speaking assignments, her talks, one thing really cuts through. It's her famous quote that everything is a paradox, and the danger is one-dimensional thinking. There is indeed going to be no room for one-dimensional thinking in the world of tomorrow, making her the right choice, the apt speaker, and somebody we've all been very keenly looking forward to hearing. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our keynote speaker, Lesley Hazleton. Such a pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you, Sidra, for such a great introduction. All I have to do now is live up to it. I've been wondering why the podium was so far away. Now I know. There's a big hole here, which is why you guys are so far away and I'm way up here. I'm not quite sure what the hole is for. Are you the orchestra pit? To Beacon House and to the whole of the Kasuri family for inviting me to give this keynote. Are we going to wait for that to die down? Sound people, have you got that under control? Thank you. You might think of my purpose here this morning as either disarmingly absurd or absurdly ambitious. Because what I'd like to do, particularly in the light of what's been happening both here and in the United States, is talk about soul, ruh. The soul of tomorrow, perhaps? Not quite. As a writer and psychologist, I guess you could say that I come at soul at a rather different angle than those who usually talk about it. Or rather, they don't talk about it. What they talk about is the soul. That definite article, the, making it sound like something very concrete, a specific entity that you can grasp, get a nice solid handle on. Sound people, is this the soul of the whole speaking? A specific entity that you can grasp, get a nice solid handle on, which only seems to make it very small. And who wants to be small-souled? So I'm out to rescue soul from the tyranny of that definite article and breathe new life into it. Not the soul of tomorrow then, but tomorrow with soul. Now, I should first admit that I do have a somewhat fraught history with the subject. Oh God, it feels awful. As a child in an English convent school, I heard a lot of talk about the soul. In fact, I think of it as soul talk, except that even then I sensed that there was something oddly soulless about it. This still sounds so odd to me, I'm sorry. Is it sounding odd to you? Please say yes or no. No? Okay. All those who say yes, just put your hands up. Okay, so it sounds okay. Okay. The nuns never explained exactly what a soul was, though they did pray a lot for lost ones. And as the only Jew in the school, I was given to understand that I just might be one of those who'd been so careless as to lose hers. And the fact that I didn't know what it was only seemed proof of this. Being a child, the best I could come up with was something like Peter Pan's shadow. You might remember how distressed he was when it was snapped off by a window being slammed shut, and his relief when Wendy sewed it back on. I gathered that to lose your shadow was a terrible thing, and for quite a while I kept on kind of checking behind me to make sure mine was still there. I actually don't have one right now. But at least I could see my shadow. My soul, however, to the extent that it was allowed I still might have one, remained frustratingly elusive. Though not, as I'd yet to discover, to others. René Descartes, for instance, I think therefore I am Descartes, was convinced that the soul resided in the tiny pineal gland, right in the center of the brain. It's back here. In fact, the function of this particular gland is to regulate the sleep cycle by producing melatonin. So I forgive Descartes by thinking that he just wanted to stay awake. Or take the American country doctor who claimed 100 years ago to have actually weighed the soul as it left the body at death. He hadn't, of course, but popular legend couldn't resist, which is how come the nether reaches of the internet, much given to what the current United States administration calls alternative facts, will still tell you that the soul weighs 21 grams. And that peculiarly small amount seems apt for such a reductive concept of soul. I mean, there were larger ones too, still physically small, but at least metaphorically larger. In food, for instance, if you like chicken giblets, you might know that back when wealthy Victorians ate goose for supper, the bird's lungs were called the soul. Not the heart, not the brain, nor the liver, the lungs. And these lungs were considered the finest delicacy, the portion offered to the guest of honor. And musicians still use the word soul. They use it for the sound post of a violin, the small peg hidden just underneath the bridge, which transmits the vibration of the strings to the body of the instrument. So the soul is what gives a violin tone and depth. It's what enables it to resonate, to reach out into the world. I think we need to reach out further, though. To quit thinking of soul as some kind of hidden component, and conceive of it instead as a mode of being in and with the world. Soul, that is, not as a possession, a thing, but as a quality of existence. Now, I know that there are musicians here among us today, wonderful musicians, and I also know that they get this. I mean, it's right there in the term soul music, isn't it? Not music for the soul, but music that is soul, like the singing of Nina Simone. Music that voices deep pain, yet somehow transforms that pain into beauty. By a kind of alchemy, it makes the bitter into the hauntingly bittersweet, the harshness of life into gratefulness for it, and even, despite everything, into joy. But then surely all great music is really soul music. Music that moves you, that is, sometimes literally, which is why I might find myself dancing to a Beethoven symphony, or to the ecstatic chanting of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Because music is not only an expression of soul, it's a carrier of it. Which is why it is so often banned by fundamentalist regimes. Soul does not sit well with dogma. Where soul is open to the world, dogma is a closed system turned in on itself. It relies on that tyranny of the definite article, which says, this way and no other. Thus the use of the truth, too often offered with an implied uppercase T in an attempt to give it a kind of unassailable authority. And yet more pernicious, the answer, intended, of course, to put a definitive end to all further questioning. This is absolutism, and it permeates not only bad religion, as any person of real faith can tell you, but also bad science, as any scientist of real worth can tell you, like Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics. It is imperative in science to doubt, he said. The statements in science are not of what is true and not true, but of what is known to different degrees of certainty. A sentence, by the way, that could also serve as a pretty good thumbnail description of one of the basic principles of quantum mechanics. To do good science, Feynman said, you need uncertainty as a fundamental part of your inner nature. But as is quite clear from the persistence of climate change denial, dogmatists want nothing to do with good science, let alone with the creative function of doubt. They opt for unjustified certainty over justified uncertainty. They seek a false security in the dead end of conviction, in the illusion that they know everything there is to know, or, as they say, everything worth knowing. I mean, just think a moment about what a peculiar phrase that is, everything worth knowing, as though knowledge were a kind of quantifiable value system, easily dumbed down to pie charts and PowerPoint packets. Dogmatists even pride themselves, and this comes in quotation marks, as having the courage of their convictions. A phrase that should surely lead one to ask exactly what conviction has to do with courage, especially when, if anything, it's a negative correlation. Because conviction doesn't take courage. Conviction is the easy way out, the refuge of intellectual couch potatoes, which is precisely why it's so tempting. You arm yourself with dogma against the hard work of thought. You reject the very idea of exploration, of inquiry, of possibility, including, of course, the possibility that you might be wrong. Now, I don't need to tell you that there's a lot of conviction around these days. Political demagogues and religious fundamentalists, all too often the same people, are particularly prone to it. So it's worth remembering that conviction has a double meaning. It's not only to be convinced of something, it's also to be convicted, like a prisoner in his cell, closed in, confined, cut off from the world, even at the extreme, against the world. To be in a state of conviction is thus to think small, however much you may claim to be thinking big. It's a mind confined, one that's put on blinkers like a cart horse in harness and opted for the narrow vision of ignorance. And it comes with a demonstrative, overweening pride in its own ignorance. I think of it as a Donald Trump kind of mind. Such a mind harbors no doubt. It's an all or nothing mind, black or white, either or. No room for gray areas, let alone for color. A digital mind, you might say. And while digital systems work fine for computers, at least until quantum computing becomes a reality, they're downright disastrous for human beings. This is the kind of mind whose default position is, I am right and you are wrong. Or worse, we are right and they are wrong. That dismissive use of the third person plural, used to otherize and stereotype them. It's a mind that relies on phrases like, it's simple, and refuses absolutely to take in information that's not simple. Instead, it labels anything that challenges its righteous know-nothingness as error or false, apostasy, or even treason. In short, this is a mind wrapped tight like a mummy, a mind gone lifeless, soulless. That's a metaphor, of course, and yet you can actually see it. Even someone who's never heard it said that the eyes are the windows of the soul will shrink from the callous conviction in the eyes of an ISIS fanatic holding a knife to someone's throat, or from the dead-eyed stare of someone worn down by chronic poverty or constant abuse or torture, or from the narcissistic self-absorption so demonstratively displayed by Trump every time he opens his mouth. It's as though something deeply human has been taken away. Look into such eyes, and it's like there's nobody at home. You might even think it really is possible to steal someone's soul. But of course, that's not possible. Not unless you still think of soul as a thing, a possession. I mean, I can see how a soul could conceivably be lost or stolen, even sold as in a Faustian pact. But the quality of soul is not a tradable commodity. So no, not soulless. It's more like something deep within has shriveled. Some quality of humanness turned in on itself as if in retreat. It's like such people have taken a defensive position and built a wall around themselves, walled themselves off from thought, from feeling, from humanity. Poetry, like its partner, music, reminds us of what it is to be human, celebrates what it is to be human. So I think of a poem by Robert Frost as he watched a neighbor rebuild a stone wall. It begins this way: something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. That line was much quoted back in 1989 when we watched the first sections of the Berlin Wall come down. And I'm sure many people here remember the scenes on the TV screen, the tears and the joy, the sense of freedom and possibility, of openness. And yet barely a decade later, another wall began to go up. Israel's separation wall. The strange phenomenon of a Jewish state walling itself off from its neighbors, in effect, creating its own ghetto. And now we have the prospect of the most powerful country in the world, a country built by immigrants, constructing a wall to keep out immigrants, and at the order of a man who himself is the son of immigrants, busy making America small again. You know, I get that it's easy to imagine that walls provide security. They seem so solid after all. But the reality is that walls are built out of fear. You wall yourself off, wall yourself in, when you are afraid, when you fear the worst. And yet by building walls, you forestall the possibility of anything different happening. Better to be ruled by the past, you tell yourself, than by hope for the future. You imagine that you're strong because you've made yourself impregnable. But as so often, the law of unintended consequences applies. Here's another line from that poem by Robert Frost. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in and walling out. How's that for a great question? What am I walling in or walling out? Because what's true of stone and concrete and steel is also true of minds. Walls define not only physical space, but also psychological space. They limit how far we can see, both physically and conceptually. They block the horizon, block our vision, close our minds up behind barriers of dogma and righteousness and conviction. They make us short-sighted, stony-hearted. And if the walls were to come down, the stones dismantled, could soul be a matter of being brave enough to be vulnerable? To acknowledge the risks of being vulnerable, that is, and embrace them nonetheless, because risks they are. And those I think of as brave souls know this. In a way, they're the personification of soul music, like Nelson Mandela. They often bear the scars of bitter experience, and yet they're not ruled by fear or resentment. They place their faith in possibility, preferring the chance of being proved wrong to what they recognize as the illusion of always being right. That takes courage. Not the obvious courage of the lauded military hero, but the quieter, everyday kind of courage it takes to live with soul, to be open to the world, to think about the future without fear and without prejudice, to envision a better tomorrow. And that's the kind of courage I know is gathered here today and tomorrow, the courage of open minds and open hearts. The courage of soul, which is vitally important, and I do mean vitally. Where the closed mind of conviction devalues life, even takes life. The open mind of soul honors it. In fact, it's essential to it. So essential that it's right there in the way we speak. So, remember those wealthy Victorians dining on goose and savoring the delicacy of the lungs? I think of them again because even though they were Victorians, they may have been onto something when they called the lungs the soul. The lungs, breathing, the breath of life. I'm not sure if this association exists in Urdu, and it isn't quite there in English, but it is there in the sister languages of Arabic and Hebrew, in their use of cognate words such as nafs and nephesh, which can mean either breath or soul or spirit, or all three at the same time, intertwined, breath and soul and spirit. And there's what's been missing for me. Spirit. Isn't this what we need when we talk about soul? That sense of vitality. We need to make it spirited again. Give it life again. Give it guts again. Give it lungs again. We need to dance with ideas, resist the attempt to stifle them, create room for them to reach out and to resonate, room to expand. Because the world of tomorrow doesn't start tomorrow. It starts right here, right now, today, with courage, with intellect, with soul, and above all, with spirit. And I thank you for it.